If you've been looking at me this morning and you've been thinking, wow, what a great haircut he's got, you might be the only person thinking that. Like I think many of us, this past week, I cut my own hair. And it was a lot harder than I thought it would be, especially the back part. Uh, but I had this story that said, you should be able to cut your own hair. That should be easy. This is just one of the many ways this pandemic has been revealing a rugged individualism that runs so deep in white American culture and that has some consequences that are a lot more serious than a mediocre haircut. I want to talk about a few strands of this idea of rugged individualism. One is this story of self-sufficiency, that I should be able to do it all on my own. This comes up for me when I'm having a bad day, and it's the voice that says, you shouldn't need to call a friend right now. You should be able to take care of this yourself. It came up for me at the beginning of the pandemic. I was trying to decide whether to lock down by myself in New York City or to come out and be with my parents. And that voice said, you shouldn't need to be with family right now. You should be able to spend a few months quarantined. All this despite tens of thousands of studies that show consistently social connection is a primary predictor of health, well-being, and happiness. We're wired to need one another as social beings. And yet, this idea of self-sufficiency asks us to fight against that natural impulse to reach out for support. In 2018, 47% of Americans reported feeling lonely. I wonder why. Nobody, but nobody can make it out here alone. Another strand of this idea of rugged individualism is the story that says, I am completely responsible myself for the outcomes of my life, that it's all up to me, and I can control my destiny through determination and force of will. For sure, determination can be a powerful force that can change our lives, that can change the world, but it's never everything. What does determination have to do with the 38 million Americans who have lost their jobs because of this pandemic? What does determination have to do with the ways we might self-sabotage because parts of us learned at one point in the past it wasn't safe for us to put ourselves out there? And what does determination have to do with the systemic inequality that means parts of our identities can shape which doors are open for us and which doors are closed, that can shape whether we live or die? In this pandemic, Black Americans are dying at 2.5 times the rate of white Americans. That has nothing to do with individual responsibility. That has to do with systemic irresponsibility. There are so many factors that shape the outcomes of our lives that don't fit into this story of complete individual responsibility, of rugged individualism, but that's still the story that we keep on telling, that we keep on worshiping. And we pay a price for that, internally and externally. Internally, it feeds what Brene Brown has called an epidemic of shame in this country. Because if my success is all about me and my determination and how great I am, the unavoidable flip side of that is that when things get hard, it's all about how bad I am. It's all my fault. And we become our own harshest critics. And then that feeds into our loneliness problem, because when hardship is understood to be a personal failure, I'm less likely to reach out for help when I need it the most. We could be telling a different story, though. We could be telling the story that nobody, but nobody, can make it out here alone. But we keep on telling that story of complete individual responsibility, and it has external consequences as well. Politically, this is the story that's been used to dismantle the social safety net. All you got to do is work harder, and then you'll get ahead. It's the story that justifies immense levels of economic inequality in this country and distracts us from the systems that need our attention. But we could be telling a different story. Nobody, but nobody, can make it out here alone. The third strand of this story of rugged individualism is this whole idea of a separate sense of self. This story tells us that we are all isolated individuals destined to be competing against one another and destined to dominate over the earth. But how separate can we really be from one another when this pandemic is showing us how much we depend on essential workers? When we're seeing how your health affects my health. We're seeing how all of us are sharing this experience of being afraid if we're going to lose someone we love. And how separate can we be from the earth that this story says we can dominate when all it takes is a microscopic virus? We can't even see this thing. And it's brought all of human civilization to its knees. And are we really separate from the earth when we know that touching the soil releases the same chemicals in the brain that touching another human being releases? We are the earth. We are the earth. And just like the story of self-sufficiency and complete individual responsibility, like those ideas have consequences, so does this idea of separation. I'm sure we would feel less alone, less ashamed, less of a need to climb all over one another if we knew we belonged here, just like a tree belongs in the forest, not because of what it does or because of how it compares to other trees, but because it's a tree, it is the earth. That could be our story too. We are the earth too. And I'm certain we would have reacted faster to this pandemic, and we definitely would be taking climate change a lot more seriously if we recognize that the health of this whole interconnected web of existence is our health. We're nothing without it. Because nobody, but nobody, can make it out here alone. The good news is that all of these stories, these aspects of rugged individualism, they are not our inherent nature. They're relatively recent ideas. We know even today, there are plenty of communities where self-sufficiency is not understood to be the sort of ideal of human development. Human development is about learning how to live in harmony with community and with the rest of the earth. And we can't even blame it on our Judeo-Christian values, because the Bible is full of stories that speak of the importance of building beloved communities that lift up the vulnerable and take care of all of creation. It's only in the past couple hundred of years that these ideas have really taken root. And since these are human-made stories, and pretty recently human-made stories, we can humanly unmake them. So how will you live into this idea of the individualism? We know the story of rugged individualism. What might a story of rugged interconnectedness look like? And how might you embody that and live that and tell that in your own life? And totally open, if you feel so moved to share your thoughts in the chat, you're welcome to do so in terms of what that might look like in your actions, in your words. For me, it means being more vulnerable with people. It means changing the ways I talk about my successes and failures. And it even means sometimes, this is a real act of vulnerability, sometimes it means talking to plants. Because why not? It also means in this moment right now, acknowledging this sermon is not mine. I put a lot of effort into it. I gave it my voice. But this sermon is the work of my parents too, and their parents and their parents. It's the work of the birds that you might be hearing in the background. They're participating in this. It's the work of all of the teachers I've had throughout my life, and their teachers and their teachers. It's the work of the oats I had for breakfast this morning, and all of the human beings and other forces that brought them to my bowl. And it's the work of so many thinkers whose ideas I've really just synthesized in this sermon. People like Charles Eisenstein, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Ibram X. Kendi, so many more, and all of the thinkers whose ideas inspired them. And of course, it is the work of Maya Angelou. Nobody, but nobody, can make it out here alone. I love that line, and when I hear that second part, the but nobody piece, I'm imagining that Maya Angelou is talking to us and anticipating that we're going to say, but I think I can make it out here alone. Or, but I heard of one story of someone who made it out here alone. And she's saying, but nobody. Emphatic. It's not even letting that thought finish. So we may have to keep on cutting our own hair for a little bit longer. And there may be other things that we have to do that we don't feel equipped to do. But we never have to feel inadequate because of it. We never have to feel ashamed about reaching out for help. And we never have to feel like we're disconnected from the web of existence that holds us all. Each one of us has a chance to tell a different story if we want. We can tell a story of rugged interconnectedness, a more natural story, a more human story, the story that's written in our DNA that says we need one another. Everybody, but everybody.